All right, welcome back to Cove Street Boatworks. Today we have a boat that I rebuilt more than 20 years ago, come back in. It's a 1955 15-foot Chris Craft Cavalier. It's a plywood boat. We found this on a local lake, a pond actually, in pretty rough shape. And we took it all apart and we rebuilt the frames and we reskinned it with Accsoon plywood. And then we put some mahogany on the deck to make it look like a more traditional Chris Craft. And again, this was more than 20 years ago. I think the thickness of the wood, we used a plywood subdeck on here. We bonded the mahogany pieces that you see, the solid pieces. We bonded them, I forget whether it was epoxy or 5200, could have been either one. But again, that was done a long time ago. It has remained very stable. It's been through 3 owners since we did the original restoration on it. And there was a couple periods of time when it was up for sale and a little neglected and the finish came off of it and it was pretty heavily weathered. The current family that owns it has taken excellent care of it for many years. It's in the water at a summer home all year long. There's no fiberglass on this bottom. It is just a mahogany plywood bottom. It's kept painted. It is in remarkably clean shape. And I mean, the people aren't crazy about it. They use it. They get a lot of people in it and they go out and they tour the lake with it. But it has just held up amazingly well. It has a Chris Craft Model K engine in it, 6-cylinder. I forget how many horsepower off the top of my head, maybe 85 horsepower, single carb. And the thing has performed flawlessly. I think the engine's been rebuilt twice. Just recently, there was, if it dropped a valve or there was a crack in the head, but there was some issue. I think it was a head issue because they replaced the head. And before that, 20 years ago, the engine was rebuilt. So, you know, flathead engines like this, they are just rock solid. So you can see the two-tone on the side here. Again, it was just Accsoon plywood that we put on there and we bleached it out and stained the bottom part of it. Nothing fancy, very, very straight ahead. You can probably already see that the plywood has hit the dock a few times and everything, but it's amazingly resilient. This boat has really held together well. It was custom upholstered. The interior, when it was sitting outside for a while, uncovered when it was for sale, it got a little twisted and warped. But it's pretty much straightened out. Again, very simple, straightforward interior in this boat. There's really been no issue for more than 20 years. It's on a trailer. The trailer, you know, like any kind of smaller trailer, it's only a 15-foot boat. So they didn't want to go out and get an inboard trailer that are cut away to allow the prop and the rudder and the shaft to get lower. So this was just a regular outboard style trailer and the bunks are raised. So it's quite high off the trailer and off the ground, which makes launching it just a little bit of a challenge if you're not launching in a ramp that has a pretty good depth, you know, fairly short into the water. Fortunately for them, the lake that they live on, the ramp is really nice and it does get really deep very quick. So they're able to float this on and off without any problem. And again, the boat stays in the water for the entire summer. Just a little detail of the interior and the dash and the front deck. And again, you can see that I laid a veneer, a mahogany veneer over the plywood subdeck. The interior, the dash itself is original, has most of the gauges. I think we may have replaced 1 or 2 of the Stuart Warner gauges, but not many of them. And the ceiling was added on the inside. I don't believe originally there was any ceiling. It was just opened up to the inside showing the frames. So we added the small amount of ceiling in there. The kickboard's original, the flooring's original. Really, you know, adding that deck, that veneer on top, especially on the mid deck, made an enormous difference in the way this boat looked and added a lot of value to it. The mid deck's been a challenge to maintain over the years because the pieces are fairly small and the bonding, and obviously there's always a little bit of movement in there, especially since this is a big open utility. There's going to be a little bit of movement because it's not really well reinforced across the boat once you get beyond the deck. But, you know, 20 years and you know, what you're seeing, it's never had any major restoration. We've stripped it down and refinished it maybe once or twice. That one time when it got heavily weathered, but that's about it. Other than that, it really has been just sort of continuous, you know, good maintenance. Nothing major over the period of years, and it has held up extraordinarily well. These are great boats. People turn their nose up at them because they're plywood, but to be honest with you, if you want a boat that performs really well and you can pull the kids on a tube and they're low cost to get into and they're very low cost to maintain, these are really, really good boats. And you can see with just a little creativity, you can make them look a little more expensive, I guess is the right word. You know, make it a little more appealing from an aesthetic point of view than maybe just the regular plywood decks. So one of the things we do for the winter, of course, is winterize the engine. We pull the intake off from the pump and we run RV antifreeze through it, and then it's stored inside for the winter in an unheated warehouse. And in the summer, we just check the hoses, reconnect that intake hose. I change the oil in the fall, so if there's any kind of water or anything in it, then it's changed out for the winter when it sits. In the spring right now, we just check it and make sure that you know, there's no condensation in there, that the oil is still clear and clean looking. I run it through a bucket. I just draw up through the pump. You know, I prime that pump and draw up through a bucket just to run the RV antifreeze through here in the yard, make sure the engine starts. It's always a little bit hard starting the first time in the season, and I usually have to use starter fluid. The owner is much better at using the choke on this engine than I am. They seem to have no trouble at all. And of course, when it's out in the sun and it's warm, the gas tends to vaporize in those old updraft carburetors much better. So they have very little trouble starting it during the summer. It is 12 volts. And what else? It's got electronic points in it. Other than that, the engine is pretty much stock. The keel and the interior planking, or the interior plywood, I should say, we maintain it pretty well in terms of keeping it painted, keeping the bilge painted and stuff, but it is clean. I mean, this just came to me for the spring. Coupling is safety wired, of course. I replaced the flexible connector on the shaft log a couple seasons ago, the original exhaust pipe. But this thing is just a little gem. I mean, for the original amount of money that was invested in doing the restoration, this has provided many, many years of service and hopefully a lot of fun for the owners. Just one final shot of the deck and the front of the boat, showing the mahogany veneer, and it's thicker than a veneer. I forget whether it was a 1/4 inch or 3/8, but it was something, it was probably about a 1/4 inch thick. Had to be thick enough for us to be able to have screws, you know, there to hold it in place, more or less just so we could show the plug patterns, because we really didn't need the screws, but we wanted it to look like a traditional deck. So it had to be thick enough to be able to countersink and bung those screws. So I think it was around a 1/4 inch, but you didn't want it too thick, because anytime you bond something to a sub panel like that, if it's not fairly light, it's going to give you problems. Original hardware, original horns. I think originally we may have had everything replated 20 years ago. Original windshield, the rubber on the bottom has been replaced a couple times. But again, you know, there's a cover on it. It's covered while it's at the dock, and this little boat has held up super, super well. Anyways, I thought you might enjoy seeing it. Very short episode this week, just to show you what comes in the spring and gets ready to be launched for the summer. So I hope you enjoyed this 1955 Chris Craft Cavalier, 15 foot. Thank you.